Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining. Really great to have you here. So welcome to one of our ProdPad webinars. So this is part of a series of webinars that we run. We have a bunch of these that have been recorded in the past. So if you head to prodpad.com/webinars, you can find some of our past ones. And these are a mix of presentations from guest speakers, as well as firesides, so conversations between myself and others. And it's always from just different amazing experts that we interact with. So we've got Jeff today, and we've always got different people coming in, bringing their insights, and it's always with a focus on content, learning, and sharing. So talking about product management and all of the sort of adjacent areas and things that we love to learn about. So today is going to be recorded and shared. So you will get a copy of this afterwards, and you will have a chance to ask questions as well. So by all means, use the Q&A section, and we will get a chance to hopefully ask Jeff everything that we can, and we'll have a chance to just chat through whatever we can today. Now, before we jump into intros and everything else, I just want to tell you a little bit about ProdPad, which is the product that we build. So ProdPad was originally a tool built by myself and the product co-founder, Simon. We were both product managers ourselves and essentially needed tools to do our own jobs. We needed something to keep track of the experiments we were running to try to hit our business objectives and to solve our customer problems, and something to help keep tabs on all of the ideas and feedback that made up our backlog. Building ProdPad essentially gave us control and organization and transparency. And so, after we built it, it wasn't long before we shared it with other product people around us. And today it's used by thousands of teams around the world. So it's free to try. You can try it out. Yeah, you don't need a credit card. You can just jump in and start using it. And we even have this really cool thing. It's called a sandbox mode, where it has example product management data. So you can see how things like OKRs, lean roadmaps, experiments, ideas, customer feedback, how it all sort of fits together in a product management space, and you can play with it and move it around and everything. And our team is made up of product people. So myself and my co-founder are both product managers. Our team is made up of product people. So you can always ask us anything and get a real understanding as to how it's used. So start a trial today and then get in touch and let us know your feedback. We live for hearing how it's working and how we can always build on that as well. So let's get to it. And I want to introduce our guest today. So this is Jeff Gothelf. Now, how do I know Jeff? I mean, I've had the honor of meeting Jeff quite a number of times now in person, which is great. And actually in a number of cities as well. I think last time we hung out, it might have been Singapore.
Singapore, yeah.
Singapore, yeah.
Last time
we've had the chance to work together on the conference scene because he's a world-class speaker and workshop presenter and just all-around product expert and knows his stuff. So we've had a chance to hang out around the conferences. One of my favorite memories of Jeff was at an early Mind the Product dinner. It was at the speaker dinner when we were sitting together and we're talking about book publishing. This idea I had of maybe writing a book, and everybody else at the table had written a book. And Jeff was super practical about it. And he gave me some really actionable advice about which publishers are good at what and what to look at, and then said I should definitely write my own thing at some point. I can't remember what the idea is that I'd pitched at that point in time. And note, I haven't actually written my book yet. I tend to communicate in shorter bursts like tweets and blog posts so far. But just hearing that gave me some strength and some real motivation, which I loved. And I always find it's really incredible to get advice from someone who's been there and done it, and encouragement from someone who's cracked those hard problems. And it's worth pointing out that Jeff, since then, has gone on and written 2 more books, Sense and Respond and Forever Employable, and also made his own publishing company, Sense and Respond Press. So really interesting to see how he's taken that and built on that and gone from there. Speaking of Sense and Respond Press, I should actually give a shout out to that because I love their books. They've got these books that are like nice and short, actionable pieces. And what I love is that you can even see like how long the book is going to take, like 40 minutes. Like I have the concentration of an ant, but I can go through these things and I've got a bunch of them and they're just absolutely brilliant. This is the one from Kate Leto, who was last month's guest. So you can go back in the webinars thing and see her talk about hiring product managers. But yeah, so that is Jeff's backstory. Jeff, is there anything that I missed in there that you'd like to cover?
No, I think that's excellent. You know, I've been it's interesting. The book thing is the one thing that surprised me over the years, because Lean UX was the first book that I wrote. I wrote it ultimately with Josh Seiden, and it was such a difficult process because I didn't know how to write a book. It was brutal. It was a brutal process, and I was bad at it. Let's just be honest. I was really bad at it, and it took Josh coming in at the end and working together to really get it over the finish line. And at that point, once that was out, I was like, I'm never doing this again. Like, that's it. I'm never going to write another book. Like you, I'll tweet, I'll write a blog post, right? But there's no way I'm ever going to suffer for 2 years again like this with this, you know, because it's self-doubt. You're like, is it good enough? Will the publisher like it? Will they publish it? That type of thing. Because just because you wrote the manuscript doesn't mean the publisher is going to write it, is going to publish it. And then what's interesting is you put enough distance between you and that traumatic event, and you're like, I could do it again. And then it happens again. You're like, okay, that was hard. I can do it again. And it gets a lot easier now. And Josh and I are now, in fact, in the midst of finishing up the manuscript for the 3rd edition of Lean UX, which is a very significant rewrite of that book. And, you know, it's going to become what I do at this point, and a lot easier. But yeah, I suppose practice and multiple attempts eventually make things a little bit easier to do.
Excellent. Oh, that's really good. And I'm seeing some great comments here. Like Jolie is just saying, glad you didn't stop, Jeff. And other people saying, hooray for short books. So some real shout outs here. Philip is saying that he learned a lot from Lean UX. And absolutely, it's a great book. And great to see that it's moving on to its 3rd edition and keeping up to date.
Excellent. Good to hear.
Awesome. So thank you, everybody. So great to have you on our webinar. Great to have you here. And so today we're going to be talking about OKRs. And so when I first reached out to you asking if you wanted to join me for a fireside, you put forward this idea of OKRs for work, but also for life, which I thought was really intriguing because, you know, usually we think about OKRs as this thing that we do at work, you know, once a quarter, and we set them all up, and then we try to hit our OKRs, and, you know, they sometimes fall over. A lot of times they fall over. They're pretty tough to do. And, you know, this idea of using them for our personal lives was intriguing. So I was kind of curious as to, you know, where this had really come from, and what if you could frame that for us.
Absolutely. Look, and I think it's worth starting initially with just let's just talk about what OKRs are and what makes for, in my opinion, at least, a good OKR. And it's really important actually to set this foundation, because I work with organizations every day that are trying to implement objectives and key results. And if there's lots of reasons why, like you said, they fall down, you don't even get to them. A lot of organizations don't even get to decently written objectives and key results. And so let's just talk about foundationally what those things are, what they are, and what a good one looks like. So first and foremost, in fact, Janna, I've got a mural that I can share. If we can swap back and forth a little bit here. I can share my screen, it looks like.
Let's do that. Can you do that right away, or do I need to press something here?
It says I can't share while you're sharing.
Oh, well, let me stop my share.
Excellent.
All right, can you go?
And so I've got, just to kind of put a little visual up on the screen and help folks. So this is the combination, but just a mural that I put together for this, but really thinking through what makes for a good OKR. Let's just talk about what does it look like in theory, right? If we just kind of zoom in on the core pieces of it, like right there, right? So the O stands for objective, which is important because I'll be honest with you, I work in some organizations where they say outcomes and key results. And that's highly problematic, and you'll see why in just a second. But it's the O stands for objective, and it's the goal or what we're trying to achieve. Now, generally speaking, right, the objective should be qualitative, aspirational, inspirational, and time bound. So this is we're talking about the things like, we want to be the #1 product road mapping tool in the industry. We want to be the go-to e-commerce marketplace for food delivery in Europe by the end of the year, right? With some kind of a time box on there. And what these are it's supposed to align with some kind of a strategic goal that the organization has. And it should motivate the team. In other words, it's inspirational for the team or for you individually to achieve that particular goal, right? Yeah, we want to be the #1 product road mapping tool in the industry, right? Why would we not want to do that or aspire to that, right? The key results tell us whether or not we've achieved the objective. They are observable, quantitative, so provable metrics, measures, and most importantly, they need to be outcomes. Now, outcomes are measures of customer behavior, measures of user behavior, right? And so the way that we know that we've achieved the objective is that we see other people change their behavior in a way that benefits them and benefits us as a business. And so those are outcomes, right? Measurable changes in the behavior of the people who use the products or the services that we create. And it's amazing how many organizations don't get this part right. And this is the absolute most basic breakdown that I can think of to talk about this. And this is why the organizations that I've worked with at least 2 large organizations where they keep saying outcomes and key results. And it's confusing because the key results are outcomes or should be outcomes.
Right.
And so these aren't the same thing, which is very important. So let's talk about a couple of examples here, right? So these what are they getting? Like we take these right here, right? We take these right here and we'll say, look, our goal is to become the top e-commerce destination in Europe by the end of Q3 or by the beginning of Q3 2021. Okay, great, terrific. That should be, look, it's qualitative, it's aspirational. We aspire to that. We're not there yet today. It's inspirational, I hope, right? We hope that this gets people out of bed and coming to work every day. And it's time bound. There's a deadline that says we want to hit this by a specific date. Okay, terrific. How will we know that we have done that? Well, 50% of all e-commerce sales in Europe go through our site. That's provable. It's quantitative, and it's a measure of customer behavior. Now, these are fairly high level OKRs, right? These are like company level, business unit levels, but nevertheless, that's a measure of customer behavior. Average order size increases 25%. Again, quantitative, provable measure of customer behavior, right? And number of return visitors each month doubles. Again, quantitative, provable measure of customer behavior, right? Now, in theory, and remember, everything is our best guess. It's an educated guess. It's our assumption. It's our hypothesis. In theory, these 3 things tell us that we are becoming the top e-commerce destination in Europe by Q3, right? And then what we can say is great. Now we can put there is where is it? Sorry. Do something like this, right? You can say, look, we're going to take the yellow team, and the yellow team's going to work on return visitors, right? We can put a team on that, and we can say, okay, great. And then, blue team's got to work on average order size. That's their job, right? You can put a team on that, and you can say, look, we're going to put another team on just sort of driving traffic to the site or usage of the site, and that's a red team, whatever it is, right? But the idea here is that these could be specific tasks for individual teams. They could be business units, et cetera. But this, in my opinion, is a well-written objective and key results statement that essentially embodies these qualities over here.
That makes sense, and that checks with how I think about it as well. Because one of the things that I always do is I try to play them forwards and then back. So it's like, okay, well, you want to become the top e-commerce destination, right? That's what you put your objective as. And so it matches all those things that you've just outlined. But those key results, if you were to do those key results, you could realistically say this will get you that objective, right? So if you were to play all your key results backwards and achieve all those things, then you should become the top e-commerce destination, right? They should add up together to get you that particular thing. And that way you don't get this disjointed thing of sometimes just having key results that are there because they kind of fit the topic. So you should be able to play them up and back down again and go, okay, yeah, this still fits when I sort of read it the other way as well.
Yeah, and look, and the reality here again is that these are our assumptions, right? Our assumptions are that if we get 50% of all the e-commerce to go through our site, we'll be the top e-commerce destination in Europe, right? It's a guess, and as we and one thing you'll notice, and again, this is why this is so important, right? Because one thing you'll notice that's missing from here is features, right? There's nothing in here that says, well, what's the team going to be building, right? And so if you've got red team, blue team, yellow team, each working on each one of these key results of these behavior changes, well, at some point, what they're going to end up doing is they're going to end up, generating, some kind of hypotheses, right, about how to do these, right? Like they'll come up with feature ideas with apps or whatever it is, right, for each one of these ideas. And what happens in that situation is that then they go and start to build these things. And the measure of success for these hypotheses, these features that we build is, well, is it driving e-commerce sales up?
Yeah. Or
some leading indicator of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that actually stacks with what somebody's just mentioned in here. Raphael's just said that they like using the opportunity solution tree with OKRs.
Yeah,
Teresa Torres's work, which basically allows you to say, here are the different potential outcomes we're going for, and here are all the different things that we could try. And it sort of creates this tree-like structure. Mm-hmm. And the hypotheses are sort of the different things that you could try, and the outcomes you can see the sort of tree structure itself, but allows you to look at the different ways that you're going to get up there. And this also stacks with the way that I think about OKRs as well, because one of the things that's often missing from OKR literature is this hypothesis thing, or what I call initiatives. Not many spaces actually really talk about it, I guess because OKRs doesn't really check very well, OKRs. But it's like, well, you have the, what it is you aspire to be, and then what you're measuring for it. But there's that missing, like the so what, like what are you actually going to do? And the so what does come afterwards, which is why it's not included in that initial thing. But it is that glue, which is the what's going to happen, the hypotheses or the things that need to happen. And this is where stuff like the opportunity solution tree or road mapping and other stuff sort of glues it together into the, well, what are we doing next, right?
Yes. And what's interesting about this too is that I think if done correctly, this starts to explicitly force agility into an organization, right? Because, like you said, these are initiatives or these are hypotheses. We are not 100% confident that these are the things that we should be building and designing and developing and implementing in a specific way, because literally there is an infinite number of combinations for implementing every feature idea.
Exactly that, right? And what it's doing, it's giving alignment and autonomy, right? So the alignment is that objective, the business saying, here's what we need, right? This is what good looks like. And, we can measure what good looks like. So that's the alignment, to make sure everyone understands what that is. But the autonomy is, well, you are smart people, right? Team red, blue, and yellow. You're all smart people. You all have access to all the market data, the tech data, the customer data, all that stuff. You go figure out how you're going to go do these things. You can be autonomous and find all your own hypotheses and test them and use an experimentation-driven way to solve them. And that gives teams a much broader way of finding the solution to things, rather than the old school way, which is, stand at the beginning of the quarter and say, these are the features we're going to build, and hopefully by the end of them, it'll solve some problem.
Right, and it builds objectivity into the conversation. And which is rare in a lot of organizations. There's a lot of, well, I outrank you, so do what I say.
Oh, I like that. Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Right, because the objectivity. So look, let's say, for example, that this is our goal, and the team came up with three hypotheses for driving e-commerce, right? And then let's say that the boss came up with some ideas as well. Boss ideas are always in red, right? Right. So we'll take the boss ideas, and they're always in red, right? Like at this point, the decision-making process that the team is making is not based on whose idea was it or how awesome we think the idea is. The decision-making is done by, well, is it helping drive an increase in overall commerce market share in Europe, right? And if it isn't, right, then it doesn't matter who came up with it, we're not going to work on it. Right? Or we're going to stop working on it. And that is, it's really, really important. And so what this does, if implemented correctly, right, you're driving organizational agility explicitly by changing the measure of success and by changing the definition of done, right? Because normally the definition of done is, first of all, we wouldn't call these hypotheses, right? We'd call them feature. And the definition of done is, well, we shipped it. It's out.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so, and did it drive commerce? Right. Nobody cares because nobody asked that question. And so it changes this entire conversation. So just to be clear, right, I just wanted to set the foundation about how I think about this and why I think it's so important to write these correctly. Yeah. Right? Because, and again, really quick, and then I'll pause for a second, but like where organizations, you can tell I care about this because I think I see this all the time. And where I see organizations kind of mess this up a little bit is they may get this part right? And then instead of outcome-based key results, what you'll see here is they'll say something like, ship the mobile commerce app.
Right.
As a key result.
And that becomes too prescriptive.
It's output, right?
Yeah.
It's not an outcome, right?
Yeah.
And there's no guarantee that a mobile app is going to help us become the top e-commerce destination in Europe in Q3.
It shuts down the conversation because there's no hypotheses to go test about that. It means, if it's green team working on the mobile commerce app, they just have to go work on a mobile app. And whether it's the right thing to do or not, they don't get to work on that. That's what I like about setting hypotheses or experiments, because sometimes an experiment is let's add a feature, because a feature can be a great way to sometimes solve a problem, right? But sometimes the experiment might be let's change a feature or remove a feature, right? That can be a great way to fix usability problems. But sometimes a hypothesis might be, or an experiment might be around something completely unfeature related entirely. It might be let's change our packaging or pricing or the proposition. Let's change the way we talk about this on the homepage or how we price things or put it into a bundle. And by taking away the feature mindset, it actually opens your team up to thinking about different ways of working that actually might be cheaper. Like it's a lot cheaper to change your marketing homepage copy than it is to change your product.
Absolutely.
So you might actually come up with cheaper, faster, easier hypotheses to test by thinking in this way, and actually progress faster.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, right? Because a minute ago I said there's an infinite number of combinations of how to develop and implement and design a product, but you're absolutely right. It's not just code, copy, and design. It's pricing model, business model, pricing structure, marketing copy, et cetera, that could absolutely fundamentally shift how people behave. And we shut all that down when we say, ship the mobile app, and we're just kind of back to waterfall software development.
Yeah, exactly.
Visual aid there.
Now, someone in the company, somebody in the comments here asked about sub-team level OKRs. Do these work in the same sort of way? Because I think we're looking at sort of company level OKRs here.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that that Josh Seiden and I teach all the time is this idea of mapping more tactical outcomes as leading indicators to these what we call impact metrics. So measures of the health of the business. So average, sales, revenue, profit, customer satisfaction, et cetera, tend to end up on an executive dashboard. There are lots and lots and lots of leading indicators that drive that behavior, right? So for example, you could say things like, let me just move some stuff out of the way here for a second. Let's pick this one in the middle for some ideas, because that's a really good question, right? So average order size increases by 25%, right? That's a goal that we have. There are let's just call them leading indicators. That's what they are. They're just more granular outcomes that are potential leading indicators of average order size increasing. For example, let's just and I just like using all the colors. So we'll just keep changing the colors for no reason other than just to do a little contrast. But one leading indicator, and I'm kind of making it up on the fly, right, of average order size could be, time on site increases, by 75%, something like that. So they're spending more time on the site. The odds of them adding an item to the cart increases, right? You could to that end, you could say, average number of items in the cart, increases, by 20%, whatever it is, right? So what these end up being is these are potentially leading indicators of average order size going up. Again, just to give you, do another one like, oops, I don't know why it moved. Average click-through rate on email marketing goes up 50%, whatever, right? Like these are all things that could potentially lead to average order size going up. And so we need to explore. And what this does is it gives the team hints as to potential ways that they could adjust the user experience, the customer experience, in order to achieve the company goals and hopefully make the customer more successful at the same time. And so these are far more granular, right, than average order size as well. So I hope that answers the question a little bit. Excellent.
All right, good stuff. We've got lots and lots of other questions in here as well. Like how do, Alejandro asked about how OKRs adapt to company size. Like do startups have shorter OKR cycles versus larger companies?
Good question. So I think generally speaking, you want to, I don't know that it's necessarily affected. The size of the company affects company level objectives and key results. But that doesn't mean that regardless of the size of the organization, that we just set these on autopilot for a year and then come back in 12 months and check on them. We need to check on them in some kind of a regular cadence in cycles that are shorter than a year. And so in most organizations, in most large organizations, that's quarterly. Right? If you're in a big company, right, quarterly, let's reassess our objectives and key results. Make sure they still make sense, make sure we're tracking towards achieving them or not, make sure that nothing dramatically has changed in the marketplace or in the world that makes some of them irrelevant anymore. Maybe there's been a strategic business decision to exit a business unit, so we don't want to invest as much in there. Whatever it is, right? But quarterly, at the very least, we want to check in a large organization. I could see that in a startup, those check-ins, because things move so much more quickly and the fluctuations are a bit more dramatic, certainly in the early days, that you might want to check on them a bit more frequently, let's say every couple of months rather than every 3 months. So you're checking in 6 times a year rather than 4 times a year. It's just, you definitely want to give it enough time to assess whether or not these are the right things, whether you're headed in the right direction, and whether these still make sense as goals for the teams to work towards. It's just that if there's greater volatility in your business or in your organization, then more frequent check-ins. And look, the formality of those check-ins, especially if they're becoming more frequent, can be reduced as well. It's just, hey, let's grab lunch and take a look at these and see how it goes. Could be a reasonable way to assess this.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I mean, I've always pointed out that there's nothing magical about 3 months, right? It's just the time period that seems to make sense for a lot of teams, because it's enough time to get a lot of things done, but not get stuck on something for too long. But if for some reason it makes sense for your team to do 9 weeks instead of 12 weeks or 2 months or whatever, right? I mean, go for it, right? Adapt these types of systems to work for your own company. But there is power in time boxing something, because it means that you don't get lost down those rabbit holes. And there is power in something consistent that people actually understand and can use to have a consistent terminology and process that they can follow. And so OKRs is that consistency. And that provides that time-bound recommendation, which most companies stick to 3 months because it is a pretty standard way of breaking up the year.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I get the same question too, like, why 3 months? And my answer is always the same: because it's shorter than a year. That's it. Just talk to each other more frequently, and just have, if you have to force these checkpoints, then fine, quarterly it is. But anything shorter than a year is a win in most organizations. So that's a great way to go. Hey, before we jump into the next thing, I just wanted to connect it to the personal side, and then whatever questions come up, we can go wherever the conversation takes us.
That makes a lot of sense.
I just wanted to connect it to the personal side here as well. And again, I put together just a couple of examples here. And so again, if you think about the objectives and key results, right? The key results, we want to measure the change in behavior in other people, right? And so, for example, you might set an OKR for yourself, right? So, as a product manager, you might have, my objective is to become a more prominent in the product management community by the end of the year, right? Which again, if we're looking at our criteria, in my opinion, people could disagree, is qualitative. What does more prominent mean? It's aspirational. I aspire to be better known. Inspirational for myself. I'd like people to think that I'm smart. And it's time bound. I've given it a year, right, to get to the end of the year. Now, how will I know, right? How will I know? Well, I want to see a 50% increase in the number of my Twitter followers, right? Maybe that's look, it's quantitative, it's provable, and it's a measure of other people's behavior. And technically speaking, it's an indication that you're delivering stuff people are interested in reading. I want to get at least 5 speaking invitations this year, right? And generally speaking, we talk about ratios or rates, but if in this particular case, like if you got 1 last year, maybe it's 5 this year. Right. And everything that I write, I would like to get at least an average of 1,000 views. Again, all of these things are measures of other people's behavior. They're quantitative, they're provable. And in theory, right, and that you ultimately have to decide, right, if that is helping you achieve if you think you're becoming a more prominent member of the product management community, right, by the end of the year. Right. So very, very much in line with the in-house ones. Where it gets a little bit trickier, and some folks will disagree with me on this as well, is when you're trying to kind of improve on a particular skill, like especially like stuff that, and this is my life, my eternal struggle, right? So my objective for the last 35 years at this point has been to become a better piano player.
It's very cool.
Yeah, right. And which is great, right? But then it's kind of like I could take, and I have hundreds of lessons, like dozens of lessons, right? I could practice. You could say, look, take 1,000 lessons, practice 10,000 hours, perform 500 gigs, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a measurably better piano player. And it kind of gets a little odd there, right? Because I'm not impacting, like, none of these things here are measures of other people's behavior. They're actual they're outputs that I have taken part, or they're measures of my behavior, right? But they don't necessarily tell me that I've become a better piano player. So it does. There is this line where it gets a little wonky.
I could see ways that you could still create some KRs that were within the spirit of it. So I've seen KRs, key results, defined as something that you influence, right? They're not things that you do, but they're things that you influence, right? Yeah. So the ones above, the PM community thing isn't something that you do, they're things that you influence, right? Yeah. So you can write all the blog posts that you want, but getting the views depends on you actually putting them in the right place and communicating them and writing good blog posts. Getting at least 5 speaking invitations. It's not applying to 5 speaking spots. It's writing good enough spaces and going to enough places to get 5 invitations. That's things that you influenced. And I suppose, when it comes to upskilling, it's something like being able to confidently play to the end of this Beethoven piece without mistakes, right? Being able to pick up and play with your jazz friends, and be invited to join a band. I don't know, whatever. Right. Those things that you might aspire to be able to do in terms of that you would be measuring yourself at the level that you are.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're right. So like these are the things that I do. You could argue that these are output, right? These are the tactics that I've put in place to get better. And then what you said is exactly right. Get something like 2 invitations to join a band, right? Yeah. That's influencing somebody else's behavior. That's spot on, right? That's exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I'm learning guitar right now, and I still can't hold down. Those chords where you have to hold down the whole finger and then bar the chords, things. Yeah, the bar chord. Like I still can't do that without it making that terrible buzzing noise. And I know, like mentally, I know how to do this, right? But like physically, I'm not there. And so really, like my KR would be like, okay, I can do that comfortably, quickly enough, and to just play it in a song, right? That'd be my KR. Maybe by the end of the year I could do that. But to get there, I would have to practice over and over and over again and like build up my strength. Maybe I'd get the squeezy thing to practice my arm strength, whatever I need to do. Right. There's probably some things I could do to improve on that. And one day I will hit an F.
Right. Good luck. I know that struggle. So I hear on that.
Any other musicians, product people I know tend to come from, or I know a lot of product people who come from musical backgrounds. So if you're musicians, let us know in the chat here.
Yeah, for sure.
And awesome. The chat is exploding. All right, wonderful. Yeah. Licensed bathroom karaoke singer, excellent. Pianist, wonderful, excellent. I got a ukulele for Christmas. That's my newest. It's so fun.
I love it. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a really great primer on OKRs, and we are getting all sorts of amazing questions that I want to try to organize in some way so that we can get your thoughts on them. So where do I start? You all have some great questions. So all right, so Liz asked this really good question around, do you have to have met all the key results to have succeeded on your objective? As in, like the example is that if you've achieved key result 1 and 3, and the order size increases by 20%, that order size one that you talked about, have you failed?
Yeah.
Or have you succeeded? Like, how do you measure that?
So you hit the nail on the head on why organizations struggle with this, right? So yeah. So managing the outputs is easy. It's easy because it's binary, right? Did you ship the thing? Yes. There's the thing. I shipped it, right? Yeah. Did anybody use it? I don't know. You didn't ask me. You asked me to ship the thing. So like you either did or you didn't. And so if it's easy to measure, it's binary. So it's either easy to measure, it's easy to manage. And so if you ship the thing, and that's what I asked you to do, then you get paid and you get a raise and maybe you get a promotion and you get rewarded and celebrated at the all hands meeting, right? Um, if you're managing the outcomes and I wanted you to increase average order value by 25%, and as Liz asked, like, and you hit 19%, and I'm your boss, right? Do I fire you? Right? Like, do I reward you? Like, and you know, and that's why organizations struggle with this, right? Because it's not binary per se. It's a spectrum. Like, is 20% good enough? Is 19% good enough? And I will tell you from experience that the context makes all the difference. So, you know, having spent the first decade plus of my career as a UX designer, I'm well versed in the UX answer for everything, which is it depends. But let's talk about context, right? I was on a team. This is a case study that I wrote about in Lean UX, and so if you've read Lean UX, you know this case study. But it's a good descriptor of this. I was on a team who had a key result goal of increasing the open rate for communications between two parties in a system, increasing it to 75%. So if two parties are communicating with each other in a system, right, 75% of the time, that communication is open and read. Okay. We had that goal for a quarter, and after a quarter, we came up for that quarterly review, and we met with the stakeholders, and we said, look, in 3 months worth of work, we've shipped this, we tried this, it didn't work, we tried this, it did work, and we've increased the open rates by about 38%. And if you feel like this is making progress and we are learning what we need to be learning and we're headed in the right direction, then here's what we think we will do. Right, our hypotheses, our initiatives, our opportunities in the next quarter. And so what you've done there is you've presented your stakeholders, your bosses, whoever, with evidence to allow them to make a more objective decision. And in our case, the stakeholders said, 38 is much better than we were before. You're learning good stuff. You're making good progress. You can have another quarter. Okay? And so we worked for another quarter. Experimented, shipped some stuff, killed some stuff, et cetera. And at the end of that quarter, we hit 68% open rate, right? Not 75, 68%. And we came back in for our check-in with the stakeholders. And we said, look, we're at 68%. Here's what we've learned. And if you give us another quarter, here's what we'll do next. And the organization said, you know what? That's good enough. We've got more important things for you to work on than squeezing another 7% of open rate out of this thing. 68% is great. It's way better. It's like 3 times, 4 times where it was when you started. So now we're here, and we'd like to move you to the next thing. And so there's an onus. Like we always like to blame the bosses because it's easy, right? They don't get it. They don't know how to manage this. But I think there's a tremendous amount of responsibility on the team here to come back with all of that evidence and to put all of that in a well-articulated story in front of your stakeholders and say, look, you asked us to do X. We're about halfway there. Here's what we've learned. And if you fund us, it's incremental funding. It's nothing more complex than that. If you fund us for another quarter on this initiative, here's what we think we will do. And you're allowing them to make a real-time, evidence-based, objective decision about whether or not it's worth your time to continue working down this path. And I think that is the team that can tell that story in a compelling way to their stakeholders on an ongoing basis can successfully continue working this way.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. You know, one of the other things that, always stuck out to me about OKRs is that they're not meant to be a performance measurement for the individuals, because as soon as you do that, what then happens that people then start giving you, they start buffering, they start being really careful about what they say they can do with their OKRs, right? They start saying, oh, well, I think we can get it to like 20%, but not 50%, because they're worried that in the next performance review, if they miss it, they're going to miss their bonus or their pay rise or the next step in their career. The whole point of OKRs is you're supposed to make big, hairy, aspirational goals, and they're supposed to be hard, right? There's that rule of thumb that if you're hitting them at like 70%, you're doing a good job, and you're not supposed to hold that against people. If you're hitting all of them, you've probably undershot, and you probably didn't, necessarily try enough things to try to solve that problem. There's probably more that you could have done, but people were afraid to go outside that box.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, look, if my performance review is tied to my key result targets, I'm going to sandbag them, right? I'm going to
sandbag. That's right. Yeah.
I'm going to put in targets that I know I can hit.
Yeah.
Because I want my raise. I want my promotion.
Yeah.
Right. So disconnecting them from performance management is absolutely key, which is another reason why organizations struggle with this, because they now have to rethink how to do performance management. Right. Before it was like, well, the team worked and they shipped a thing. So, they did their job. Right. Yeah. That type of thing. But here it's like, well, they're shipping stuff, they're not shipping stuff, they're killing stuff. How do we measure their performance? And it's fundamentally different. And it's a topic for another webinar, but just generally speaking, I've thought about this a bit. It's about like, how are you making decisions? How close are you to the customer? How curious are you? And again, these are fuzzier qualities that we need to somehow build into performance management elements, which most organizations don't do. It's tough.
Yeah. And tying into that, I think, is a couple of people have asked this, is do OKRs cascade down to individuals? What are your thoughts on individual OKRs, especially since you're talking about using them for personal life?
Yeah. So let's go back to the mural. Do you mind letting me share again?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're up.
Excellent. All right. So this is interesting. And I do have one more little panel here about this. And I wrote about this. So thanks for setting me up well, Janna. But I wrote about this in HBR recently. And as you can tell from the title of the article here, use OKRs to set goals for teams, not individuals. You can kind of see where this conversation's headed, right? That's the TLDR of this discussion is in the title of this HBR piece, but you can read a lot more detail there. But generally speaking, right, once again, right, here's an example of trying to make an internal personal OKR work. And again, this is kind of comes back to the conversation we were having before. Let's say my objective is to become a level 3. And I don't know what level 3 is, but it's more than 2 and less than 4, right? So currently you're not a level 3, right? So I want to become a level 3 software developer by Q4 of this year. And you're saying, well, what can I do to get there as a personal internal development goal? Well, I can read 5 books on object-oriented programming. I can take a 12-week Pluralsight course to make me smarter, and I can code a prototype mobile app in the new technology. Now, the challenge with this, right, is that these are not the behavior. Oh, now you see it. There's my big reveal. All my stuff is there. In there. But look, these are not other people's behaviors. Right. So first of all, these are the outputs. This is like practicing piano, right? Or doing a performance. And so there's no guarantee that these types of activities, and this is, look, and to be clear, I'm using this example because this is how I see people writing their internal personal development OKRs at organizations, right?
Yep. And I could back this because we tried personal level OKRs when we first launched OKRs within ProdPad, and they went down this deep, and we ended up taking that back and going just team level, and it's much better.
It simply works that way, right? And so there's no guarantee that these activities made you a better developer, right? So you read 5 books, terrific, right? And these are outputs, right? These are not the measures of other people's behavior. And so if I suppose you can go down this path and you can try to figure out KRs that are measures of other people's behavior. But generally speaking, I think OKRs work really great at the team level. And then below that, we get into those performance management criteria that we talked about, started talking about just a few minutes ago. But I think this becomes difficult to do well.
Yeah. All right. We have some other really interesting questions in here. A few people have asked this, and one person's even stayed anonymous with this, pointing out that their lead time is 3 months. Like, how do they measure the results quarterly? somebody else has pointed out that, their releases are measured in quarters rather than weeks. How do OKRs work in that sort of place?
Look, all of these variables are malleable, right? So we like to look, I'll speak for myself. I like to think, I like to kind of, generally speaking, my default positioning is a modern, digitally enabled organization. So Amazon, Facebook, even legacy businesses that have gone through a fairly significant digital transformation. And in those organizations, you've got teams that are shipping, in some cases bi-weekly, in some cases weekly, in some cases daily, hourly. At Amazon, it's literally every second, right? So whatever, right? There's a big, but those are the scales for those organizations. And so if the scale for your organization is, look, we have quarterly releases right now, well, then the time horizon for your OKR needs to be longer, at least for your strategic ones. And then you need to figure out, well, okay, what can we measure in shorter time horizons? What are some leading indicators, right? So just because you're releasing or shipping to production once a quarter doesn't mean that you're not releasing software, that you're not finishing software along the way. What can you learn about that software in the meantime that could potentially function as a leading indicator for your longer time horizon strategic OKR? So all the variables that we're talking about here are malleable to your context. Now we talked about a quarter or 2 months or 9 weeks or whatever it is. But if that's too short for you to learn whether or not you've delivered value, then stretch it out, right? And then try it for a cycle or try it and see if that's too long or too short, and then adjust. Like none of this stuff has to be set in stone forever, right? Like in many ways, you're going to retrospect on this process, see what worked, and then adjust moving forward.
Yeah, and that's always a good point. I mean, the whole point about OKRs is that they're time boxed to that 3 months as a starting point. But if the company decides that, well, actually, you've done, 5 experiments that have got us this far, it didn't get us all the way there. So we actually want to now invest in the next quarter to do the same objective. We still think that this is important, and we're going to now try to spend the next quarter doing the next 5 experiments to try to get it up some more. They don't have to necessarily stop everything on that thing and go work on something else if that is still the most important objective to go hit.
Yeah, and again, this is. And this again is I keep there's all these anti-patterns that keep bubbling up in this conversation. This is good. Yeah. We want some consistency, right? We want some kind of a signpost that says, as an organization, we're heading down this path, and these are the mile markers that tell us that we're heading in the right direction. However, along that path, we are going to discover things that we did not expect. And it is the organization's responsibility to take those new learnings and adjust course and adjust the path and maybe move the mileposts. And that's okay, right? That's agile. That's being agile. That's agility. Let's just forget the religion, right? The capital A religion. Let's just talk about the quality that we're looking for in an organization or in a team. It's agility. And so we want this stuff to stay predictable to an extent, but when we learn things that invalidate our hypotheses and our assumptions, then we need to adjust course. And that's I think it's the beauty of working this way, if done properly in the way that we've been discussing for during this conversation.
Yeah, and I think that actually really helps frame OKRs as what they can be used for, is that they're a tool, they're a framework to help make sure that the company is in fact staying lean, that they are thinking in terms of experiments, they're thinking in terms of the objectives that they're trying to reach, they're measuring the outcomes, that they are giving the team alignment, as in where they're trying to go, and the autonomy, and that they're giving the team space to be agile, right? To adapt and change and find ways to solve those problems, as opposed to, feeding them the answers from the get-go, which obviously in the waterfall style, everyone knows that doesn't work anymore, right? That never did work.
It's inevitably risky. It's needlessly risky.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really love how you've applied the concept of it to personal as well. Like, I can see why it doesn't work with individual OKRs, because it just gets a little bit too prescriptive and teams tend to end up tripping over themselves, right? Because you end up with this tool that just becomes almost a task manager, and you're busy just trying to solve the problems for the company. You don't necessarily need levels of OKRs to work out your career within the company itself, but you do have objectives that you do want to reach within your own career, and the OKR system can help create that framework for it.
Absolutely.
Now, Jeff, I was just going to say, somebody just in the chat did ask about more resources, and I was just going to throw this up on the screen as well. And Jeff, you just posted a link, I think, to this.
No, so I offer lots of things. I'm
okay.
Janna, so a couple thoughts. So in the chat, I dropped a link to an OKR masterclass that I'm teaching in April, and it's 90 minutes, $90. Bring your bosses if you want, and we're going to have this conversation, but with some light exercises and very concrete examples. And what Janna's got on the screen here. So most recently, I wrote a book called Forever Employable, which is a book about how to think about your product about your career as a product or a service, and how to start to build this recognized expertise, this thought leadership, so that you can start to generate opportunities to come towards you. And there's a lot of product thinking applied into this: assumptions, hypotheses, experiments, regular shipping, retrospectives, and that type of thing. We literally just finished this past Tuesday the first cohort of this, and we are looking for our next cohort, which will start in April. And so if you're interested in learning more, there's lots of information over at becomingforeveremployable.com. Just hop over there, or just drop me a note. I'm super easy to find and get in touch with. And I'd love to see a few of you. There's my email address. I'd love to see a few of you in that session coming up next month. It would be great to see you there.
That's wonderful. Congrats on finishing your first one, Jeff. That sounds like a great program. And thank you so much for joining us here today and sharing everything that you know about OKRs and how you apply it to both work and to personal life progression as well. And thank you, everybody, for all your questions. I know we didn't get a chance to get to all of them because there's tons of great questions. They're not being forgotten. I'm going to keep a list of these. Jeff, I'll share them with you if there's anything here that you might want to write about later. Perhaps, maybe we do another one of these one day as well. But great to get a chance to hear from everybody today. And thanks again for joining. This has been great.
Thank you, Janna. This was fantastic.
All right. Wonderful. Thanks again. Bye.
Bye, everybody.